Before we get into this episode, I want to say something quickly. If you're someone who's already spent years and thousands of dollars building your brand, and you feel like it isn't growing at the speed or scale it deserves, this might help. We're offering free one-on-one coaching calls to help experienced brand owners figure out what's actually blocking their growth and what to do about it. We'll sit down with you, walk through your brand, and help you get clarity on your next steps for growth. I've been working in fashion for over 10 years, and across hundreds of conversations and dozens of consulting projects with brand founders, I've seen the same problems come up over and over again. And most of them are fixable with the right strategy. This free coaching call is meant to give you that clarity, to help you stop guessing and start moving forward with confidence and simplicity. These calls are completely free. But since they take a lot of time for me and my team, we can only offer a limited number. So if you're serious, apply using the link in the description. Now, without further ado, let's get into this week's episode.
Well, I think what I see now and the brands that are doing well now, and then there's this new cohort of brands that I'm fascinated by that have sort of emerged really during COVID. Like COVID was a time of huge creativity across the industry. A lot of the creativity went absolutely nowhere, and then a lot of and some of that creativity really translated. And I see, and there's a cohort of brands that started during COVID that I think have a couple of what I think are the magic pieces. And I'm getting a little sort of into the nuts and bolts, but I think, it's interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
it's, um, One is a really strong gross margin going into it, which I think a lot of people underestimate. They're like, oh, with scale, when we make 1,000 units, our cost will be good, then we'll have good
Right.
margins. Right now, we're sacrificing margin. There's an element of that, but I think if you're able to go with a really strong gross margin from the beginning, you're able to have a really balanced business in terms of DTC and wholesale, right? And
What
then
do you
you're,
think? What do you think? It's because I have so many questions here as you
yeah.
speak, and I don't want to read, but what do you think? And again, I know it varies from business to business and based on the brand they're trying to build. But what's a good foundation? Like, what's a good figure that they have to aim for from a gross margin perspective? How should they think about it?
I mean, good for me, good, like not decent. Good is a 60% wholesale gross margin and then like
Hmm.
80% or north of 60, north of 80. So 60, north of 60 in the wholesale, north of 80 in the DTC.
Okay, understood. Let's continue with
That's
the
good.
magic pieces. Sorry for
Yeah.
the.
Yeah. And again, I mean, listen, if you're 50, like you still have a business there. Like, if you're 30, you don't. So I'm just saying like there's, you know, better businesses and worse businesses. The better businesses have the higher margin, right? From a
Right.
business perspective. Then the sort of the mix, the DTC. So these brands are DTC native, right? They were able to generate demand on their own platform and then capitalize on it on the wholesale side. So
Hmm.
only DTC gets super expensive super fast, right? In
Yep.
terms of customer acquisition. Only wholesale, these days you're screwed. So like you
Yep.
really have to have a balance of both of them, whether that balance is 50-50, whether it's 60 DTC, 40 wholesale, I think somewhere in that area, but having a really good sort of spread. And then having that sort of grassroots demand, having people, having a community of shoppers. It doesn't even have to be that big, honestly.
Right.
But they have to be engaged and they have to have the money. I mean, they have to have the money for your product.
Right. And just so that people can know and identify how to think about this process, um, what sort of numbers in terms of revenue are you thinking about? Like what type of questions are you asking yourself as a brand owner, depending on the revenue levels? For example, well, I'm below $100,000. I should just be focused on getting actual demand. Oh, I'm around 1 million. I should be more focused on establishing and solidifying D2C. I'm at 5 to 10 million. Maybe this is when I start thinking about diversification in terms of my distribution channels. Like what questions are you asking yourself as a fashion entrepreneur at what stages?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I'm going to answer it quite directly, knowing with all the caveats ahead of time that each business is different, that each,
Of course.
like all
I
those
think
take all
everybody
those
assumes that,
caveats
yeah.
into. But I think until you're a $2 million business, you're not really in business, right? It's like you need to get to 2 million, like you need to get to a level where there's people again, there's like not just your family's buying, right? It's like people you don't know have like your product are buying your product. And that happens definitely north of 1 million, but in the single million perspective, right? Then you have the ramp from the single million to, I would say, I maybe 20 million. That's sort of like, so the first stage is the real, it's like 0 to 2, 0 to 3. That's like
Yeah.
really establishing whether you have anything there, where you have a brand. And
Right.
maybe, I don't know if to your audience that sounds high, 2 million, or sounds low. I've been in different sides in my career. Like,
Right.
I've been a side where like 2 million seemed like the golden horizon, and I've been in the times where 2 million is like barely the cost of the point of entry.
Right.
But it really isn't a couple $1 million. Until then, you're not really in business, right?
Right. And
And
again, like below 2 million, it all comes down to the foundations, right? Do you have demand? Do you have decent infrastructure? Do you have profitability?
yeah, but
Yeah.
you can get there with a Shopify site, with like a line sheet, and like, you know what I mean? Like, if you have demand and if you can generate it, it doesn't take much to get to the
Mm,
$2 million mark, right?
right.
That- I feel bad now for all the people who are struggling at, you know what I mean? Like, I know it's hard. I know it's hard, but then the 2 to 20 becomes a little bit harder because, and
Mm,
that you can still do sort of organically, but it becomes you have to hire people, you have to expand your team, you have to start spending on marketing, you have to like make real decisions, and that's a very sensitive point. And then
mm.
honestly, 20 to 100 is where it gets even more difficult because then you're really talking about scaling and starting to compete with brands that are really at the global level and
Yeah,
have more
LVMH.
pockets
Yeah,
than you
yeah,
do.
yeah, of
Exactly.
course.
So I
Very
think
interesting.
that to me, it's in a way harder as you go along, and then it becomes easy again when you're like
Hmm.
north of 100, but that's a different ballgame. That's not my specialty, you know?
Interesting. Okay, and do you think the same principles still are the principles that apply at each stage? Demand, infrastructure, profitability. It's just how do you explore and double down and improve on them that changes as you grow, or do the foundations themselves change?
Well, and that's the biggest sort of difference that I see now between the way the industry looked like or thought like, when I started more than 20 years ago. So the older business models sort of assumed, I made so many business plans where like you don't break even until you are $5 million. Like you sort of you have
Hmm.
losses every year, then you turn a corner, then you hit like $5 million and then you start breaking even.
Right.
And I think that used to be the thought process, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think that has to change. I think it changed, but I think it also needs to change
I mean,
where
investors aren't even allocating capital to brands in that position anymore, are they?
not really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think investors in fashion in general, I mean, but that's a whole, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about investment in fashion, how in fashion specifically as a vertical fits or doesn't fit into investor expectations and sort of
Right.
like it's been the sort of the
Yeah, let's put
foundation.
a pin on it at the end of the conversation,
Yeah,
see if
for
we have
sure.
additional
For
time to kind of
sure.
like
I
connect the
think that
dots.
businesses now, because of this, the ability to start as DTC first, but with a balanced idea towards distribution, you can
Hmm.
achieve profitability faster. And then the idea is, can you keep profitability all along, right?
Hmm.
So you start, I mean, nobody makes a profit the first year. Do you know what I mean? Very few people, but at least in year two, do you know what I mean? You have to get to at least break even and then grow with your demand, like maintain, the infrastructure to grow with you. And a lot of people do that through, less people have offices, they keep sort of that overhead lower, they keep the staffing costs lower and use a lot of consultants.
Hmm.
There's a ways to sort of do that and really keep costs tight and keep profitability. And I think to me that's the both the more interesting way of doing business and obviously the healthier way of doing business. Um,
Hmm.
that doesn't apply necessarily to kind of the venture backed. So I guess
Yeah,
the
let's
cap,
leave that later because
yeah,
again, nobody realistically nobody is starting a brand with investor money nowadays. I mean, if they are, it's a very, very small minority.
very
Um,
small minority. But I'm
yeah,
really, I guess the caveat that I want to say is that I'm really focusing on sort of designer driven, sort of
mm,
creative driven brands in
yeah,
fashion.
yeah, yeah. Okay, understood. And again, just to keep that formula kind of like as a very easy and simple foundation to understand on this conversation, um, demand, infrastructure, profitability. In what priority order would you think about? Is again, I think demand comes first, right? Because if you don't have demand,
Always,
you don't really have everything.
always.
What should entrepreneurs be focusing on or taking as a second priority a little bit more? Is it profitability or is it a little bit more infrastructure? I know
I
they're
would
a
say
little bit
demand,
correlated,
I would
right?
say
But
demand first, gross margin second,
mhm.
um, and then sort of operating margin.
If this episode resonated with you, and if you're building a real brand, but growth still feels inconsistent, overwhelming, or just not to the scale your brand deserves, we're offering free one-on-one coaching calls. And this call will help you identify exactly what's getting in your way and what to do next. These calls are limited and application-based. So if you're serious, click the link in the description, fill out your form, book your call, and if we think we can help, we'll confirm your spot. Hope you enjoyed this podcast episode and see you on the next one.